President and the Secretary have made very clear 100% operational control of our southern border. I mean, we've got probably close to 10,000 troops on our southern border. We're surging a Stryker Brigade combat team down there to reinforce the land border as well. But there's a sea component to this as well, and that's part of the mission of the USS Gravely is to secure the water routes in defense of our southern border. And so, Aaron, Daily Caller.
Thank you, Sean. Will the Department of Defense commit to firing or otherwise disciplining any remaining leadership that were directly involved in the Afghanistan withdrawal?
So we're in the process of figuring out what that investigation will look like. But I'll tell you, as somebody who served in Afghanistan and watched that unfold, I mean, I was horrified in a lot of ways. You know, you think about how much time and blood and treasure and American life that was lost in Afghanistan over 20 years. You think about that for a second. You know, I'm 43 years old. This country was at war in Afghanistan for 20 years. So almost half of my life, this country was at war in Afghanistan. And I personally watched, you know, the men in my platoon, but also my larger brigade combat team, which was a part of the 10th Mountain Division, 3rd Brigade. We bled the ground red in Afghanistan. And I watched my men do extraordinary things in support of a grateful nation and in support of the mission there. And to watch Afghanistan be surrendered in the way that it was extremely difficult. And I think something that President Trump and Secretary Hegseth really understand is that when America makes a decision to get involved in any conflict, we have a moral obligation to have a clear-cut end state to what that operation looks like, a clear exit strategy to what that operation looks like, and to make sure that victory is clearly defined. And I think in Iraq and certainly in Afghanistan over the last 20-some years, I think maybe we've struggled a little bit with those finer points. But I'll say that President Trump and Secretary Hegseth, they understand that when America gets involved in a fight, it's our job to also end that fight as fast as humanly possible because we have a moral obligation to win and win decisively. Otherwise, you're going to have an entire generation of American warriors wondering what the hell it was all for. And I know that every day I wake up and I draw breath, I think about the men who I served with, who were my friends, who never came home from that fight. I've lost 30 friends in my support of the Afghan war, 30. And you ask yourself, you look yourself in the mirror, you ask yourself, what do we have to show for it? Not a whole lot. And so to your question of will people be held accountable? I think we have an obligation both to the American people and to the American warfighters who fought in Afghanistan to hold the leadership accountable in some way. Now, we don't know what that looks like right now, but to hold the leadership that was in charge of the Afghan withdrawal accountable. Because look, if you have a private that loses a sensitive item, that loses night vision goggles, that loses a weapon, you can bet that private is going to be held accountable. The same and equal standards must apply to senior military leaders. So
I just want to follow up on what you just said.
Sure.
You said that there needs to be a clear end state. And I know the goal is to have the Houthis stop their attacks, but what is the end state? What happens if the Houthis don't stop their attacks or don't agree to say they'll stop their attacks? It doesn't seem like there is a clear end state, that this could just go on and on.
Well, in fairness, I mean, it's a great question, but in fairness, the operation's only been going on for 48 hours. And the President and Secretary have been very clear on this, that the Houthis can determine when this ends. And until then, the campaign will be unrelenting until we, one, protect our homeland, and two, open up the shipping lanes there, so make sure that we have freedom of maneuver in that area. General, you have something that...
I mean, what I might add is, while we won't talk about it publicly, just know that there is a design to the operation. There are specific effects that we're trying to achieve, and there are specific targets that have been selected and approaches that we're taking in order to achieve the president's end state. So it isn't that we're just striking capabilities. There's an intent behind every strike and every target that we go after.
To that point, you mentioned that this is not like it was before. So what is different about the targeting that you're doing this time that wasn't true under the Biden administration?
Yeah, I give the short answer to that, and again, without going into too many operational details for security reasons, but it's a much broader set of targets that we've been able to action in this case. And the other key differences are the delegation of authorities from the President through Secretary Hegseth down to the operational commander. So that allows us to achieve a tempo of operations where we can react to opportunities that we see on the battlefield in order to continue to put pressure on the Houthis.
Thank you very much. Will this operation include sending ground troops into Yemen? If so, how do you achieve your objective of making them say enough without sending ground troops?
Well, I'll tell you, it's very difficult, if not impossible, for us to talk about force posture from this podium because as a commander who's been on the battlefield, it's very, very important to keep the enemy guessing, keep your adversaries guessing. Now, that's not to say that we've got ground troops in Yemen. That's not to say that we're sending ground troops in, but it's difficult to talk about that stuff for operational security reasons from the podium. But generally, you have anything to add?
No, nothing to add to that. Okay. I think that's exactly right.
Sean, can I follow up on that? You said that one of the things that you were waiting to do for the BDA was sensitive site exploitation. Does that include U.S. boots on the ground or any kind of American personnel on the ground to do that?
I can't talk about that stuff from the podium, but we have ways of conducting sensitive site exploitations without ground troops on the ground.
Yeah, it does not always require boots on the ground, and I'll just leave it at that.
So, can I also ask you about if there's any U.S. military assessment? I know that you're still on, the BDA is ongoing, but is there any military assessment about how much of the Houthis' capabilities were degraded by these first couple of rounds? And can you say anything? The President's Truth Social mentioned going after leaders, which seems to be one of the things that's different here. Can you say anything about any of the leaders that were targeted here?
Yeah, on the second part of the question, I'll just go to my opening statement where I mentioned that there was a unmanned aerial vehicle facility that was struck with several key leaders. Those were key individuals who led their unmanned aerial vehicle enterprise and were some of the technical experts in there. So think those types of individuals that we might be targeting as part of the command and control.
And so we have destroyed command and control facilities, weapons manufacturing facilities, and advanced weapons storage locations. But again, this campaign is ongoing. It's difficult to talk about all this stuff from the podium, and we're not going to say anything from the podium until we're 100% sure that we have it right. I got time for one more question.
You mentioned the President's Truth Social. Is the U.S. military considering military options for Iran?
I don't want to get out in front of the president or the secretary, but clearly, I mean, I think the president's Truth Social was pretty clear, and I think the meaning is right there for everybody. I mean, I think everybody understands what he means. I don't want to get out in front of the president, but all options are on the table at this time. And that's all I got.
One clarification for General. You said 30 targets. Is that over all 3 days?
No, that was on the first day. And it was over 30 targets, so not a specific number for you, but over 30 targets, multiple locations, and then additional targets today and additional targets yesterday on Sunday and additional targets today that obviously I won't go into because they're executing now.
So thank you, everybody. Listen, we're done. There will be more of these, I promise, but thank you. It was a great first press briefing. Really appreciate you all and your commitment to telling the story of the warfighters, but thank you. We'll see you next time.
Thanks.